A tiny European country made one bold move in 2021. Within months, its economy collapsed, factories shut down, and its citizens were stranded abroad with no consular protection. Beijing didn't negotiate, it simply deleted them. This is the story of how Lithuania gambled everything on a political gesture, and why it's now begging for forgiveness. If you pull up a satellite view of Europe and trace your finger along the Baltic coastline, you'll eventually land on a country most people couldn't locate on a map. Lithuania. Wedged between Poland, Belarus, and Latvia, this nation of fewer than 3 million people occupies roughly 65,000 square kilometers, about the size of West Virginia. For decades, Lithuania has been one of the West's most loyal allies. It joined the European Union. It became a NATO member. It adopted the euro. And when it comes to foreign policy, Vilnius has consistently mirrored Brussels and Washington, often without question. But in 2021, something extraordinary happened. Lithuania made a decision that would pull it into the center of a geopolitical firestorm. A decision that would cost it hundreds of millions in trade, thousands of jobs, and eventually its diplomatic relationship with the world's second-largest economy. And here's the twist. Nearly 4 years later, Lithuania is desperately trying to undo the damage. But Beijing isn't even responding. So what exactly did Lithuania do? And why is China treating it like it no longer exists? Let's rewind to July 2021. In the heart of Vilnius, Lithuania's capital, a new office opened its doors. The nameplate outside read, Taiwanese Representative Office in Lithuania. Now, to the untrained eye, this might seem like a minor bureaucratic detail, just another trade office. But to anyone familiar with international diplomacy, especially China's red lines, this was a declaration. Here's why it mattered. Under the One China principle, which nearly every country on Earth observes, Taiwan is not recognized as an independent nation. Instead, it's considered a province of the People's Republic of China. When Taiwan opens representative offices abroad, they're almost always named after the city of Taipei, not Taiwan itself. This careful wording avoids any implication of sovereignty. For example, Taiwan's office in the United States is called the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office. In the UK, it's the same. Germany? Same again. The pattern is global. But Lithuania broke that pattern. It used the word Taiwanese, and that single word sent shockwaves through Beijing. Chinese officials immediately condemned the move. They warned Lithuania that this violated the One China principle and urged them to reverse course. But Vilnius didn't budge. In fact, they doubled down. Later that year, Lithuania also publicly criticized the 17+1 framework, a cooperation initiative between China and Central and Eastern European nations. Lithuanian officials labeled it a tool for Beijing to divide Europe and manipulate smaller EU states. Shortly after, Lithuania formally withdrew from the group. To many observers, it looked like Lithuania was intentionally provoking Beijing. And Beijing doesn't forget provocations. By December 2021, Lithuanian businesses began noticing something strange. When they tried to export goods to China, their customs forms wouldn't go through. The issue wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate. China's customs system had removed Lithuania entirely. The country code, LT, no longer existed in the database. Imagine trying to mail a package to an address that's been deleted from the postal system. That's what happened to Lithuania's exports. Containers full of Lithuanian products began piling up at Chinese ports, unable to clear customs. One shipment of over 20,000 bottles of Lithuanian rum sat stranded in Shanghai. Another load, 50,000 tons of dairy products, was turned away entirely. By the time those goods returned to Lithuania, they were spoiled. Even livestock wouldn't touch them. Lithuanian businesses were in panic mode. Trade officials demanded answers, but Beijing offered none. Between 2020 and 2022, Lithuania's exports to China fell from 320 million euros to just 40 million. That's an 87% collapse. Almost overnight, an entire trade relationship evaporated. But the economic pain didn't stop there. China's retaliation extended beyond Lithuania's borders. Any product manufactured in the European Union that contained Lithuanian components faced the same barriers. If a German car used a Lithuanian-made sensor, that car could be held up at Chinese customs. If a French electronics company sourced chips from Vilnius, their shipments were flagged. Global corporations quickly got the message. Continental, the German automotive giant, was quietly advised to reduce its reliance on Lithuanian suppliers. Other multinationals followed suit. For Lithuania's small and medium-sized manufacturers, many of which serve as suppliers to Europe's industrial giants, this was catastrophic. In the first half of 2023 alone, over 300 companies declared bankruptcy. More than 8,000 workers lost their jobs. And still, Beijing said nothing. But China wasn't done. For years, Lithuania had served as a modest but important node in the China-Europe Railway Express network, a sprawling freight system that moves goods from factories in China to markets across Europe. Trains from Beijing, Chongqing, and Wuhan would pass through Lithuania, stopping at the rail hub in Vilnius before continuing west to Poland, Germany, and beyond. In 2020, more than 600 freight trains passed through Lithuania. These trains brought revenue, jobs, and logistical relevance. Then, in 2021, China rerouted them. Beijing announced the suspension of direct freight services to Lithuania. Trains that once stopped in Vilnius were now redirected through Belarus and Poland. Roughly 200 freight routes no longer touched Lithuanian soil. The impact was immediate. In 2022, the total freight volume handled by Lithuania's railway system plummeted by nearly 40%. That translated into a loss of approximately 500 million euros in annual revenue. Meanwhile, the port of Klaipėda, Lithuania's main maritime gateway on the Baltic Sea, saw cargo throughput drop by 21% year over year. It was the port's worst performance in nearly a decade. Lithuania had been economically sidelined, not through sanctions or embargoes, but through something subtler and more devastating: invisibility. As the economic damage mounted, diplomatic relations continued to unravel. In late 2021, China downgraded its diplomatic ties with Lithuania from ambassador level to chargé d'affaires, a lower rank reserved for less significant relationships. Both countries recalled their ambassadors. Embassies remained open, but only skeleton crews stayed behind to process paperwork. By mid-2025, even that thin diplomatic thread snapped. The last registered Chinese diplomat in Lithuania, whose visa had expired, attempted to re-enter the country through Vilnius airport. He was stopped at the gate and deported. Lithuania refused to renew his credentials. In response, China made no effort to send a replacement. Today, the Chinese embassy in Vilnius is an empty building. The lights are off. The doors are locked. There's a brass plaque on the wall, but no one inside to answer the phone. And this isn't just symbolic. It has real, human consequences. Several Lithuanian citizens are currently detained in Chinese prisons, accused of violating local laws. Under normal circumstances, Lithuanian consular officials would visit them, provide legal assistance, and coordinate with Chinese authorities. But there are no Lithuanian diplomats left in China. The consulate in Beijing is effectively closed. Families of the detained have pleaded for help, but the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has admitted publicly that it is, well, powerless. The cases remain unresolved. The detainees remain in limbo. On the business side, things are equally grim. Many Lithuanian companies rely on Chinese machinery and equipment. When something breaks, they used to fly in Chinese engineers for repairs. But China has tightened visa policies for Lithuanian nationals. Without a functioning embassy, Lithuanian businesses can't even secure the basic paperwork needed to bring technicians into the country. So factories sit idle, equipment rusts, and companies bleed money. By 2024, the reality had sunk in. Lithuania couldn't afford this standoff. When Gintautas Paluckas became prime minister, one of his first priorities was signaling a desire to repair relations with China. He didn't issue a formal apology, but his tone was noticeably softer. Then, in early 2025, the messaging became more explicit. President Gitanas Nausėda, Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis, and Žygimantas Paviljonis, chairman of the Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, all made public statements expressing hope for renewed dialogue with Beijing. One official even said, "We have decided to give China one last chance to resolve the national security threat Lithuania is currently facing." The phrasing was odd, almost arrogant, as if Lithuania were in a position to grant China anything. But beneath the bluster, the desperation was clear. It's now been nearly 6 months since those statements were made. And Beijing's response? Silence. So why won't China engage? Because from Beijing's perspective, Lithuania hasn't actually changed its position. The Taiwanese representative office is still operating in Vilnius. The sign is still on the door. The staff are still at their desks. And as long as that office exists under that name, China has no reason to talk. Beijing doesn't need Lithuania economically. China's trade with the Baltic states combined is negligible. And diplomatically, Lithuania carries little weight on the global stage. But here's what China does care about: precedent. If Beijing were to back down, if it reopened trade or restored diplomatic ties without Lithuania making a substantive concession, it would send a message to every other country watching that you can challenge China's core interests and still come back to the table on your own terms. That's a message Beijing will never send. Lithuania's story is a cautionary tale about the limits of symbolic politics in a world dominated by great powers. In 2021, Vilnius made a choice. It chose to align itself symbolically with Taiwan, perhaps hoping to earn favor with Washington or Brussels. It chose to make a statement on the global stage, but statements come with consequences. China didn't invade. It didn't impose formal sanctions. It simply stopped engaging. And for a small country dependent on global trade and integrated supply chains, that silence was more devastating than any military action could have been. Today, Lithuania is caught in a diplomatic purgatory. Its citizens are stranded abroad without consular support. Its factories are losing contracts. Its ports are emptying, and its government is sending diplomatic signals into a void. China, meanwhile, continues to grow, trade, and build. It has moved on. The question now isn't whether Lithuania can restore relations with Beijing. The question is whether Lithuania is willing to make the concessions necessary to even start that conversation. Because right now, the answer from China is clear. It's not no. It's nothing at all. Geopolitics isn't a game of fairness. It's a game of leverage. And sometimes, the smallest players learn the hardest lessons. If you found this story eye-opening, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the global chessboard is shifting faster than ever, and we're here to break it all down. See you in the next one.